Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Values Jam guest session series. And Rona, I'm delighted to have you with me today. It's just after 7 your time, right?
It is. I'm awake. I keep telling I'm up. I'm good.
So before we start the Values Jam, why don't you introduce yourself and the great work that you do?
Sure. My name is Rona Lewis. I call myself a play instigator. I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Playful Project here in the United States in Los Angeles, although we actually work across the country, and we use purposeful and attuned play as a method to help with employee engagement, team building, bringing out innovative thinking, brainstorming, all the things that help companies grow and stay relevant and allow for less quiet quitting, all that sort of thing, so that companies can keep going and grow with an attitude that allows them to look forward to the future in a positive way. It's all about that positive mindset.
And much needed, because I've not worked in the
Indeed.
corporate world myself for quite some time now, but obviously I work with a lot of people in the corporate world.
Sure.
And goodness me, sometimes it's a dull place to be.
Right. And it's, we just bring, it's, play isn't just a thing to do. It's an attitude and way to see the world, and we actually talk about, I have a business podcast called Biz Souls, BIZ-SOULS. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple, and my business partner Jeffrey and I, who's an organizational development specialist and a sales development specialist, we talk about all different aspects of play and have guests on there. I should say all different aspects of business using that playful mindset. And we try to bring it in whenever we can, because per what you said, it's needed desperately in times like this.
Yeah, and I know that we're here to have a values jam, which we need to get onto, but I'm really curious about the work that you do, because it strikes me, let's just see if what I feel is resonates with you. It feels to me that since COVID, people are more willing to be a bit more themselves rather than feel that they have to be like, wearing the corporate uniform. And I'm sensing that there might be more interest in your work since COVID than perhaps there was before.
Well, I think companies are realizing that the way work gets done isn't the way work gets done anymore, and the good thing about hybrid and remote workers is that they can be more of themselves. It's a little bit easier in terms of commute and what they're wearing, things like that. And at the same time, they are feeling a little bit more siloed. You can't just walk next door and chat with your neighbor all the time. And it does make people a little bit more paranoid and unsure of themselves and less willing to trust and be vulnerable with people. And that's what we teach them to do. And yes, more companies are asking people to return to work, and people forget how to do that. So we also work with companies once they are back at work to be able to be their authentic self and to trust each other. And that's part of what Purposeful Play does. It allows people to be vulnerable and be authentic so that they can share their best ideas. If people don't trust each other, they're not going to be willing to share their great ideas, and that can stop companies from being more innovative, because if people don't share awesome ideas, where are they?
Dead right. Okay, well, I'm really looking forward to this. So this is the Values Jam card deck, and what I'm going to do is invite you to ask me to cut the deck how many times, Rona?
Let's go 2.
2.
Just cut it in half.
Yeah. Okay. And would you like the left pile or the right pile?
I'm left-handed, so I'm going to say the left one.
Okay. And now give me a number between 1 and 25.
11.
Now, this has never happened before. And do you know, this is really weird. All right, I'm going to show you the card. So when we designed this game, we had to choose, you know, there were going to be 60 cards in the deck. And so we said, okay, what 60 values are we going to choose? Then we were saying, well, hold on a minute. What about those people that want to choose a different value than the cards in the deck? So we agreed that we would have a Joker card and 59 values cards. And now last night, well, you know, you sent me an email saying something like, you sent me some really kind of goofy kind of email. And I was thinking, oh, I want to invent some new cards. And then I thought, I wonder if we would draw the Joker. And that's what's happened. So now what this means is that you can choose any values word you like, and that's what we're going to jam with. So what's top of your mind?
Well, let's work with one of the 3 values that it takes to be able to play, which is either trust, vulnerability, or authenticity. All 3, you need all 3 things to be able to play. So you know what? Let's use the first one. Let's use trust.
Okay, so the first question that I'm going to ask you is a very simple one at one level, and then there's also a metaphor level to the question. So this is it. What does trust mean? And metaphorically, what does it look, feel, and sound like?
Trust means being able to show people who you are, which brings in that authenticity and allows you to not care so much about what other people think. It's being true to yourself, which allows you to be true to other people. Makes sense?
Okay. And for me, I agree with what you've said. I'm thinking of a theme park ride here, because when you go on a theme park ride, it's some people are scared, right? And some people don't even want to go on these rides. Now, I remember the first time I had the chance to go on one of these things, and I was a bit apprehensive, but what was bigger than that was a voice that was saying, look, these guys have tested all of this stuff. It's going to be, you know, you're going to be safe. And I trusted that that was going to be the case. So that in addition to the points that you made, I think for me, there's something about being willing to put yourself in the hands of others in terms of you being trusting. And what does it look like, feel like, sound like?
It's a feeling of psychological safety.
Yeah.
It's a feeling of just being okay with the present moment and not, you know, and not feeling stressed, kind of being at peace, being in the flow. You know, flow is when you're enjoying yourself so much that you can just go with it and let things happen and be open to the adventure of what life brings you.
Yeah, and I think there's those 2 dynamics, aren't there? You mentioned feeling safe, and I think that's absolutely important. But as you was talking about that, I started to think about how you also feel brave and courageous, actually, and willing to try things that perhaps if you weren't as trusting, you would not feel so willing to do.
Right. Absolutely. Brave. That's a great point. Yeah. And with that, you know, your description of everything so far feeds into that vulnerability that you need to be open to other people as well. Hearing, you can't, you have to trust something and some person, because otherwise trust isn't needed. I mean, you have to trust yourself as well as other people. And that comes in when you're playing.
Yeah. And actually, so something that happens, and it's just happening now to me, during ValuesJam sessions, people often say, oh my God, this has just popped into my head, and I haven't really considered it for many, many years. And this has happened right now to me because I attended, it was a coaching appetizer thing, it was like where you go along to see what this coaching company was like. And during the day, they asked for a volunteer. So I volunteered, and I was sat on this chair, and I was about to be taken through this process by one of the coaches. And he said to me, how are you feeling? And I said, well, I'm really excited. And he said, oh, you don't seem really excited to me. You seem really relaxed. And I said, well, that's because I trust you. And it was, I don't know what he was expecting. But I was just like, this is a professional guy. Whatever happens is going to happen, but he'll look after me. That it's going to be cool. Yeah, so you've just done that for me there. And what about the sound of it? Nothing's come into my mind actually in terms of what does it sound like?
Oh, I think trust sounds like at first I thought like a low level hum, and then I'm thinking, no, it's more like a purr. Because and I'm an animal person. I have a dog. My business partner Jeffrey has a cat. They actually get along really well. And when I'm at his house, because that's where we do the podcast, his cat loves me. And so he, the cat's always crawling on me. And when that happens, and he's just sitting there, and his engine's running, I just feel so safe and happy. And I'm like, that this is what trust sounds like.
Yeah, and so the metaphor that's popped into my mind now is a baby's head on their mother's chest area,
yeah,
hearing the heartbeat and the breathing.
Sure.
And for me, that is really a beautiful picture of trust.
And that, that's an interesting metaphor, because purposeful play and attuned play, being attuned to the person or people you're playing with, deals with attachment theory. There's a whole thing that goes real deep, but I'm just covering the surface. And that's when a mother has on them and is holding them, that helps with that attachment. And there are other things that go into the, and it's interesting that you brought that visual up, because it's all mixed together to get that safe feeling. So really interesting how this is coming.
And this is fantastic, because you're just sparking lots of memories here for me. Another one. So
because I'm magic, Alan. I'm magic. Just know
that. Don't take me there, because I was interviewed by some people at the university that I went to, and one of them said to me, if you hadn't chosen the career that you chose, what might you have been if you could have been anything? And I had two answers. One was a magician, so I envy you. And the other one was a musician, so in a rock band or something like that, But what you've reminded me of is an exercise that I've not used for quite some time, actually. I must use it sometime now we're all back in person again. And what you do is you ask a person, in couples, you ask one person to face away from the other person. The person behind puts the palms of their hands just a few inches away from the shoulders of the person in front of them. And then you ask the person in front to just lean back. until they are stopped by the hands of the person behind them.
Mhm.
And then you ask the person behind to step back just slightly, and until you get to a situation where the person in front is, going back quite some way.
Yeah.
And right at the beginning, people are quite reluctant to do this, and they don't feel very sure. But then they learn that they're not going to come to any harm. And it's a really, have you come across that before?
Well, I mean, that goes back to yes, and it goes back to the old trust exercise where people just fall back into the person's hands
Yeah, that's it.
and
Same thing.
trust that they'll be caught. It's a gentler version of that.
Yeah, yeah.
So yes, and it definitely takes a bit for people to be able to do that without stepping back and being nervous. Yeah.
So let's choose another question then. So when have you noticed a lack of trust?
Oh, quite a few times. It's when there are new teams, when I've actually worked with I'm trying to describe it in the broadest terms because I have to sell a lot of times saying like a non-disclosure things.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I've worked with research companies where the people that I have to work with are doctors, PhDs, and they have egos. And I was calling because they weren't following certain rules, and I had to convince them to put their egos aside and be vulnerable and understand, for the greater good, they had to follow these protocols. So that took a little bit of doing, getting people to be willing to admit that they don't know everything, and they had to trust their company, trust the other people they're working with. So that was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, it's such an emotional, subjective matter, isn't it? That no matter how rational you are in explaining why somebody should trust somebody else, that doesn't cut it, does it? Because it's far more personal than that.
Exactly. And what I have found in situations like this, and to various degrees, I usually get called in by HR or a C-level who I met through networking and connected to HR. That's just how it goes. And you're a consultant, right? That's you get in different ways.
Yeah.
That a lot of times the HR person or the manager, whoever it is, I call it game spaghetti. They throw a bunch of things at their teams, hoping something will stick, right? You throw a bunch of spaghetti against the wall, and it a lot of times it wastes time because there's forced fun. I don't want to do this. Why are you making me do this? And they don't understand that there is a definite process to trust, and you kind of have to warm people up and go slowly, and before they know it, they're kind of in the weeds, and it's that's the best way to do it, because if they're more focused on the process than being in the moment, it's not going to work.
Yeah, yeah. And probably the strongest example that comes to mind for me about experiencing a lack of trust is another exercise, actually, where you have a group of people that you split into smaller groups, say 7 or 8 people per group. And the task is for the group to complete a partially completed diagram of a maze that they have on their table. And the true copy of the maze is at the other end of the room. And the process is that they nominate one person from their group to go and look at the real copy, and then come back and tell their teammates what they've seen and start to make their partial copy as close to the real one as they can. Now, in the briefing, you explain to people that there might be a saboteur on their table, and that the saboteur's role is to prevent them from being able to complete the task. And another part of the game is that if the whole of the table agrees that one person is a saboteur, they can be expelled from the table. And it's amazing, because you hear things when you're walking around the room, you hear things like, oh, he or she walked back too quickly. I think that there's something going on here. And, you know, people jump to the most outrageous conclusions about why this person might or might not be a saboteur. You have really strong arguments. And the event that I'm thinking of, it was for about 100 people. And I think we had something like 6 people from various tables expelled from their tables because they thought that they were saboteurs. And the exercise takes a couple of hours, actually. But at the end, I won't explain the whole detail of it, but the learning of it is the disruptive power of mistrust. And, you know, once that's in, it's cancerous, actually.
I was just going to say, yeah, it grows.
Yeah.
It grows,
and so destructive and so strong, often based on very little, actually.
Look at the politics in the United States. That's a perfect example.
And you don't have to look beyond the UK either. I mean, it's
yeah, I mean, yes, indeed, yeah. I mean, it's people just jump at the smallest crack in the armor, and it's easy what comes up. It just shows how creative people can be, you know, when they're mistrustful and their minds get going. It's pretty scary.
It is, but you know, so here's a question for you, because I'm thinking about the political situation in this country.
Sure.
And there is a very low level of trust of the government in this country. And going back to the pandemic, you know, they were having gatherings when they should not have been having gatherings, and when normal people were not going to see dying loved ones, not going to funeral, you know, all of this sort of stuff. And I don't know, but I have a feeling that once the most senior people, the senior leaders in an organization, are behaving not in a good way, then kind of everybody else says, well, if it's okay for them, why is it not okay for me? And all of a sudden you've got really poor behavior in society because people think that nobody is actually behaving in the right way. So I was interested because you said people see the smallest chink and then, you know, dive in. But do you think that there is a responsibility for leaders to be behaving at a level that is higher than is normally expected?
I do. You know, it's you know, I don't you know, I don't mind if a leader goes out dancing and enjoys themselves, certainly. You know, and at this, you know, we are all human, and it's like, oh, for crying out loud, just let her go out and play, you know. And at the same time, they have to realize, you know, for this country that if you're going to be in a group, wear a mask when it's protocol, and don't have parties at your house thinking that no one's going to take a picture or, you know, whatever, because you are on, you know, all the time.
Yeah.
When you are in the public eye, whether you are a politician, whether you are a celebrity, you have to be aware that you know, or even a sports figure, which is still a form of celebrity. You're an example to the rest of the world. And I think you perhaps should keep yourself to a higher, what's the word? A higher authority, or,
Level of
whatever.
account, yeah. And
Yeah, a higher level. Thank you for that. Yeah.
It's not fair, perhaps, like you've said, but I
Mhm.
think for me, it's just a reality that comes with the territory. So if you're at that level, get over yourself and live to the level that you should in order to be a role model for other people.
Yeah, that's just it. And you hit the nail on the head. You are a role model.
Yeah.
And if you behave badly, what does that say for whatever arena you work in? And and the young people who are growing up, they're going to follow your example.
Yeah.
And it's such, there is so little privacy now between everyone having cameras and all the social media, and how people are posting things that, I just read an article, I can't remember if it was Forbes or something online, that social media is in fact affecting young people's brains.
Yeah.
And they're not formed all the way. So is that fair for our future as a society?
Wow, that's a big question, right? I've read
Yes, it
something
is.
I've read something similar as well about how, we are no longer making conscious choices because there's just so much out there happening, and we're just ending up becoming addicts that are responding and reacting to all of this external stuff, which is
Yeah,
deeply unhealthy. But let's not
absolutely.
get too depressed
Sorry.
about this.
Sorry.
So let's
Okay, just for everyone who's listening, just in a nutshell, stop that. Stop that and get more playful. Okay, now we're good. Now we're good.
well, I'm going to take it to the other end now. So this is the big question. How could more trust improve the world?
I think trust comes from within. So I think we all have to start with how we feel about ourselves, and and allowing ourselves to trust our thought process, to trust our intuition, and to trust our feelings. Our gut is usually pretty good.
Yeah.
And once we do that, then we can take a step back into society and everything else, and not necessarily just say, oh, I have to wear these clothes to be cool. I have to believe what other people are saying because I want to be liked. I want to be accepted. If you like yourself, if you accept yourself, you would be surprised how many people follow you, because when you trust yourself, it shines through, and that confidence will change how you view the world and how other people view you.
I think that's a great point, Rona, because how much in the world are we constantly told by other people what we should be like for other people? And it's only really in the last probably 5 years or so that I've started to have greater confidence in, like you've mentioned, intuition. And sometimes, it's like, oh, I feel this, but am I willing to take action unless I have the, proper explanation? And over the last 5 years, I've started to say, oh, what the hell? I'm just going to go with this because it feels right. And exactly like you said, more often than not, it rings true and it follows through. So I'm just wondering, actually, what would happen if in the education system there was something to help people to understand who they were, what was important to them, and then trusting themselves. What a difference that could make.
That it was, there's Sir Ken Robinson has the most watched TED Talk, or one of the most watched TED Talks, and he talks about how we do a great disservice to our children by, making them, reading, writing, and arithmetic, especially in the United States. This country was started by Puritans, and that mindset doesn't go anymore. We have to let kids be kids, and that's what. And I'm bringing it back to play, because it's all about that childlike sense of curiosity and wonder and adventure that allows us to trust more and to just say, screw it, let's just go for it and see what happens. Whereas when you're in that adult mindset, you worry so much about what other people think and being judged by other people that we lose ourselves. We're so worried about what's going on out here that, we forget we even have a body. So it's important to kind of go within and trust your own self and your own heads to do what's best for you. And, yes, you're going to feel your feels. And, I'm not saying don't feel bad or don't, have emotions. I'm just saying, go with that childlike energy, and you'll feel happier, and you'll trust yourself more, which will change everything.
Yeah. And this is linked closely to another area in this space, because a lot of the time we are encouraged to make decisions based on what we know, right?
Yeah.
Because we fool ourselves into thinking that we're more in control then, and that the outcome is more likely. And I think that's not the case, actually. But if you were to think about the percentage of the known compared to the whole, it's tiny. That
Right.
It's probably less than 10%. And so it's like, why would we want to confine ourselves to 10% of what is, just because it's known, instead of
Sure.
having trust to dive into the 90% and see what happens? But I don't know what it is in society, but we scare the hell out of people to do that.
It's, people live in what I call a circle of comfort. And risk is scary, depending on how you look at it. And I equate this with the feeling of going on stage. I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. And when, people, one of the scariest things that people feel is, going on stage, public speaking. They and I happen to love it, and Bruce Springsteen gets stage fright, and when he does, he just equates it with excitement, whereas Barbara Streisand equates it with scariness. It just scares the heck out of her. She overcomes it, and it's how you look at it. It's the same feeling, and how can you describe it to yourself to make yourself feel better?
Yeah.
So isn't it more fun to think of it as excitement and adventure, as opposed to, oh no, this is too scary, I don't want to do this? And it's all about risk. So in order to get out of your comfort zone, or out of your circle of comfort, or to make it bigger, take that risk, because after you do something for the first time, it's not so hard. It's like trying a recipe for the first time.
Yeah.
You're going to tend to follow it exactly as it is. And then next time it's, I'm going to try to add a little more cumin, or, whatever. And it just gets you out of that comfort zone and makes you more adventurous. And if we did everything the same way, or, and just kept it in this little circle, life gets pretty boring.
Yeah. And you don't learn anything.
So, yeah.
You've reminded me of
why not try new stuff? Yeah.
Definitely.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. You've reminded me of another story about, so this is, you can transpose London Underground for New York subway, or whatever you want to do. And
Okay,
so
yeah.
this guy tells the story about how he had decided to test himself. And so what he did was stand up in the middle of the carriage and announce the next stop. So he describes how he's really scared to do this first time. And he stands up and he announces the next stop and sits down, and people are kind of ignoring him, looking at their newspapers, all of this sort of stuff. And he felt really uncomfortable, but he decided he was going to do this for a number of stops. So the next time he did it again, and then by like stop 7 or 8, people were joining in with him, chatting with him, and it was all big fun. And he was saying, how is it that it was exactly the same thing that I did a few stops later, and yet the experience and the reaction and the whole thing was completely different? And that's the difference. That's the difference maybe between, do you choose to just sit in your seat, or do you choose to have a go at something a bit different?
And that goes into personality styles, fear of being judged, and fear of change. And I'm reminded of something that Jeffrey says all the time when he goes in. He works with organizational change and things like that. And he says, oh yeah, we're all about change. You go first.
Yeah,
it's like people in theory, they want to change, but when they actually have to do it, they're a little nervous about it. And it's all about taking risks. So, and that goes into that mode of vulnerability to try something, because people don't want to be judged and they care too much about what other people think.
Yeah.
And if you find that you don't care, you're more willing to try things, and you'd be surprised how much people want to join in. And once they see you start it, it's like being the first one on the dance floor.
Yeah.
People will join in once one person's out there. Or two.
There's a leadership video called Dancing Guy, which shows an outdoor festival where there's somebody just starts to dance. And it just takes you through, I think it's a 2.5 minute, 3 minute video. And, by the end, everybody's up and dancing. And what it's saying is, leadership is sometimes over glorified because it's the first followers that are really, really important in taking this thing forward.
Sure.
It's a really good fun video. You use it a lot. Now, on these cards, I'm going to invite you to ask your own question about trust. So ask your own question, beginning with who, what, where, when, why, or how.
Where is trust the hardest to get?
To get. Oh, it's a great question. And feel free to give your answer if you're quicker than me. I'll just share with you my thought process, actually. So I started to think about how well you know people. And so I was thinking, well, probably trust is easiest when you know people really, really well. So the opposite of that is a stranger.
Right.
But then I've had conversations with strangers where I've loved it because you're kind of anonymous. I feel that there's no baggage, no burden, nothing at all. And I'm extremely trusting, more so than with people that are closer. So, so that's not taking me to an answer, but I just taking you on the journey.
And yes, and that's exactly what I was thinking, because if you go into a company and work with them, and especially for the first time, they don't know you, and you are in as an expert. So are they going to trust you because you're in as an expert, or will they not trust you because they don't know you?
Yeah.
So it's that dichotomy, and it could be, so I don't know that there is a definite answer. And it is easier if you go into a coffee shop and you're sitting next to someone and you start a conversation, or they start something with you. People do tend to, just throw up, information, too much information, or what they're going through, what they're upset, or whatever they're, because they know that they're never going to see these people again, and the other person has nothing of value with you, so they're more likely to give you an objective answer. So I think it's a chicken or the egg question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm thinking a bit more about this now. So I think there's something about when it's something to do with the psychological safety piece again, because
yeah.
When the situation you described about the expert going into an organization, the person that you're visiting is often like, well, is this going to show me up? Is this going to make me look bad because I don't know as much as this guy, or whatever it is? And I think for that reason, I don't refer to myself as an expert at all. I refer to myself more as a practitioner, and I practice a lot. That's all. So if somebody feels that they're at risk through your level of knowledge or your position or whatever it is, then they're not going to trust you. Similarly, I'm remembering jobs where I went into a new role and people at the beginning are very suspicious because you're the new leader and you've got this, this vision of where the business is going to go. It's not the same as they're used to. And so again, for me, it's about earning the trust in the first place rather than assuming that you should be given it for no reason.
Right. Agreed. And that goes back to what we were talking about with the game spaghetti and things like that, where if you bring in a consultant, an outside person to a company, they will probably know how to gain people's trust better than the HR person or the manager, or, whatever. And at the same time, that does, there is a trust level of someone versus someone you don't. So there's always two sides of a coin. You can, when I go in, yes, I don't necessarily say I'm an expert in anything. And at the same time, it's kind of obvious that I'm being brought in as someone who is working in this area because I know what I'm doing. So it's an implicit thing. And there are people who are afraid to be vulnerable, and you have to bring them in slowly so that they don't totally disrupt what you're trying to do. I've taught online classes and multi-day seminars where there are people who need to show how smart they are and need to show me up for one reason or another. And you have to be able to, for lack of a better word, manipulate the situation so that it's a win-win.
Yeah.
And that takes experience,
Yeah. And I think the other thing as well that I find helps a lot is when you are able to relate to people on a more personal level rather than wholly on a professional level.
Yes. Yeah. And that goes to the warm-ups, the things that will allow people to share bits of themselves and stories that other people can relate to. 20 years ago, stories were considered something that business people never shared in talks, or and now CEOs take classes in how to work stories into what they're doing. It's so important to bring in the humanistic values at work.
Yeah. And I'll share this story and then we'll start to wrap this up. It was
Sure.
a small group of 5 very senior leaders, and this is an approach that I use a lot, which is I ask people to bring a personal possession with them that is really important and that they're willing to talk about. And so one of these guys, who must have been in his 50s, brought a soft, you would call it soccer ball. right? So it was a football, we call it. You call it a soccer ball, but it was a soft one
Yeah.
that you can use indoors. And he said, there's two reasons that I brought this. One is this actual football I play with my grandson in the house when they visit, and we have a ball. It's just great fun. And then he said, but the other reason that I brought it is because when I was 16 years old, I was offered a professional football contract. And my father told me that he was not going to sign it for me. And that was the last day I saw my father. And it was like, you know, the vibe in the room was just so emotional. He cried. Some of the other guys did as well. But I tell you, the trust that was established at the beginning of that session between that group of people was so powerful, and the rest of the meeting was so productive. It could not possibly have gone as well as that without him being so vulnerable and creating that in the first place.
Absolutely.
So
Wow.
I don't know why I shared that with you actually, but it's it was such a brilliant.
Because you're feeling psychologically safe, Alan.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the at the beginning I explained that we'd start with the first question and finish with the last question, and I can't believe the time has flown by. But anyway, the last question is, what are you encouraged to do differently about trust as a result of our conversation?
That's a good question. I think what I am I'm trying to use a different word than what used, but I think I am pushed to use trust and use that vulnerability earlier, and to share more of myself first as I go in to work with other people, as opposed to pulling them in first.
Okay. And when might the first opportunity for you to have a go at that be?
Wednesday morning, I'm teaching a class.
Brilliant. Okay.
I don't like to call myself a teacher. I'm facilitating a group.
Okay.
Because I don't like to talk more than half the time when I'm working with an organization, because that stops other people from sharing their ideas, So
Okay.
I like to call myself a facilitator. So yeah, it's interesting because it's a class on difficult conversations.
Brilliant.
So
okay,
this
couldn't be better then.
Perfect. Yeah.
And
Right.
mine is I'm pretty trusting to a certain extent, but when was it? On Thursday night last week, I went out in London, and we were taking a selfie, and a young guy said, "Shall I take your photo for you?" And my first reaction was, "No, it's okay, thank you." And afterwards, I was asking myself, why were you so like that? And the voice said, "Well, what if he had just run off with your phone?"
Right.
And he didn't. He took the picture and he gave it back. And so I'm going to be more aware of that initial reaction, and I'm going to deal with it better than I sometimes do as a result of this conversation.
Good. Yeah. Yes. And both these things are related to the fact that humans naturally have a negative mindset. It's a protective device back from when we were cavemen. And it's a learning process to flip to that positive mindset, to be able to be more trusting and be more vulnerable.
Yeah. So I hope the next time I speak to you, I've still got my phone.
Me too.
So, Rona, thank you once again. Thank you so much for sparing some time to have this Values Jam session with me. And
this was so much fun.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. You have a great rest of your day.
You as well. Thanks, Al.